don't care who you are, you have to live in the world.
It's very important for us to not just think about the other, but, connect, emotionally.
Oh, that's so important. It's all about relationship.
I can write about homophobia in my life in ways that no interviewer could ever capture.
Been a long night, and I'm hoping.
The next we know will appear on some sort of research video. I'd go nicely with your below the Tamar thing,
You would.
Elderly women in exercise. Because we were, she's at it already.
The fly on the wall.
This is exactly the fly on the wall, yes.
I suppose it didn't have the language and words to put around that particular time, but I think as I wrote the book, I think I realised that I was writing reflexively, because I was actually responding in the moment, not just reflecting back on the conversations that we'd had, and actually just really being reflexive and noticing I was being reflexive. It's a sort of level of the awareness of working on several different levels at the same time. Coming out of the feminist movement in research, about how people were being encouraged to come from behind that cloak of authority and be seen and to use the first person, and Mistakis's work, which was very much about looking at yourself and indwelling and tacit knowing, very much coming from an essentialist position, but nevertheless it was stepping out against the absence of the researcher. Participants are in relationship with us, and we need to think about it like that, I think. They're not just people who have some knowledge that if we dig deep enough we'll find it. We are part of a co-constructed knowledge creation. I think I just began to notice more and more how much the person that I was affected the work that I did on both fronts. That I wasn't just there as the sort of the sorted one in my therapy room, I was noticing and becoming much more aware and realising how much that was guiding my decisions and choices, of the complexity of myself as a person and the different roles, because it's very different, it is different, in some ways it is very different, but in other ways it's also similar to be doing therapy and doing research. But the purpose mainly is different. There are lots of differences, but a lot of the skills in, having the curious questions to ask, thinking about, focusing very much on what that person has to say to us, those things are all kind of similar. Transcribing when we're tapes, transcripts, when we're trying to make sense of them, when we're actually talking and asking and checking what other people think, when we've made certain interpretations or created certain stories out of what they've said, and noticing and being aware of our own responses to what they respond. It's it's really asking an awful lot of a researcher to be reflexive. Now I come to think about it. But and because we don't do all of that doesn't mean we're not being reflexive. We can be more or less reflexive depending on what we're comfortable with, what the participants comfortable with, because not everybody wants to read what we've been thinking when we spoke to them about such and such. We have to be judicious about the choice of how much we involve ourselves and other people and expose ourselves and other people. And discussing that, actually checking that out, having conversations about how we're going to represent things. and just making sure that what we're doing is enough to create research that is trustworthy and that people can, the reader, the people who choose to pick up that piece of work or read that book, they get the information that they're looking for, but they also get a sense of how that knowledge has been created, co-created, and who the people are involved in the creation of that knowledge. That it's not just impersonal, detached knowledge, it's involved and personal.
There's a lot we gotta say. Can't turn our backs, can't walk away. Got so much ground to make. Might take a lifetime, it might take a day.
So I know what I was going to ask you. So with the reflexive researcher, becoming a reflexive researcher, could you just again for me describe what your goals were for writing that? Why did you write that book?
Reflexivity is a bit of a confusing concept. I wanted to capture the complexity of it, really, and I think talking to lots of different people who were at different stages gave me the opportunity to do that. So I talked to people who were at the master stage, the doctoral stage, and postdoctoral researchers, some of them quite well known.
So I have another question.
And I learned a lot.
What would be the first sort of task that you would give to somebody to help that process?
You mean in training?
Yes, or you're working with a group, or somebody's at home, or somebody's read your book and they think, oh well, I want to try and I'm in the middle of doing research. What can I do to try and help me do that?
To be reflexive.
Yes.
It doesn't just start suddenly like that. I don't think it's something you can just say, okay, all sit down now and we're going to learn to be reflexive. I think the reason why people come to me is because they've read my book and they get it. They kind of understand the added value to reading about a bit about who the researcher is, who the participants are, how we make interpretations, what kind of thoughts we have and theories that we're thinking about as we're listening to somebody say something and sharing that with them. I think they value it. And so in a way, I don't think you have to teach people. I think it's the showing, it's not the telling. You demonstrate something, you point something out, you ask them why they like that way of working. What was it about that? What would it be like for them to have a go at doing that? So in a way it's kind of discovering what the blocks to that might be.
Okay.
And very often the blocks are about what they think other people are going to judge it as. It's not to do with them.
Yeah.
They can see it, they can actually feel the value, and people often say to me things like, I really understood it for the first time. It wasn't just jargon, or it wasn't theory all the time, or it was kind of accessible and engaging, and I could make sense of it on a human level.
That you just said to me was, being worried about what other people think about your scholarship is a block to people doing good scholarship.
Exactly that, yes, absolutely that. Indeed. And of course, that's because, still out there, the benchmark is randomized controlled trials, positivist research that sees the subjectivity of the researcher as a contaminant and is discouraged and is judged. It's very important to have your work read by people who come from a similar philosophical position. I think, to me this is one of the most important things, to get somebody as an external examiner who will be in tune with what you're saying. But in a way that's a shame, because, you also want to spread the learning and show people that, there's value in this, even if they haven't seen it like this before. I don't know. I think what I did was I gave up trying to make an apology for it, and I just thought, when I first started writing, I would kind of say how this was different from that, but now I don't. I just take it as it is. And
You just mentioned there you're sort of different now. What led to that change in you? Because
Right.
that's really fascinating to me.
developing confidence through the kind of feedback, that I realised that actually people like to read this kind of stuff, and they value it.
Yeah.
And I suppose, when you get as old as me, you don't damn care anymore, do you? And people say, oh God, it's the first research text I've actually understood. And I feel very proud of that, that's something. And people have said it's encouraged me to keep going to find this kind of work and this kind of writing. And I think that's really important. Instead of excluding people, undermining people, using a language that disables people. I suppose as I've got it is really about maturity and age and also, I'm not trying to prove anything. I suppose really I felt freed up once I got my doctorate. I wrote the way I really wanted to. I didn't feel as if I had to fit with anybody else's standards.
It's been downhill ever since.
Well, it's about being yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
And knowing enough. And you don't have to play to somebody else's tune, really.
Yes.
Although you know that this is still going to be judged.
Yes.
Papers are peer reviewed, and reviews are still going to be written. But I don't know. I think it is about having confidence in what you're doing is a good thing, and that does come from feedback. Does that answer your question?
That's brilliant, yes. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No wonder folks become so hard. It's a long road and the horizon is dark, watching winter come and go. People tell me I ain't got a clue. Now you come, now you come. Now you come to me.